Hey, what's going on, everybody? It's your boy Maurice, the sports historian, and in this video, we're going to be talking about teams that I think are contenders when it comes to WNBA playoffs and teams that I think are pretenders when it comes to the WNBA playoffs. With the regular season coming to a close soon and the playoffs starting on September 22nd, I figured, hey, there was no better time than now to actually get this video out. So, before we actually get into it, if you guys enjoy sports content or content similar in nature to this, please consider leaving a like, subscribing, as well as turning on post notifications so that you get notified every time that I post a video. Without further ado, let's get started. Starting off with, I think, one of the more difficult teams to actually judge when it comes to this contender-pretender label that I'm placing on them is the Indiana Fever. Now, the Indiana Fever are not the same team from before the Olympic break. Ever since the Olympic break, they've seemingly turned a corner. Caitlin Clark has looked phenomenal. You know, Kelsey Mitchell has been doing her thing. I think Lexi Hall is still shooting over 65+% from three since the Olympic break. They've looked great. They've looked phenomenal, and they've looked like a team that can actually win a championship. However, I have them in the pretender category. And one of the main reasons why is because this team has virtually no playoff experience. And I think that includes the coach. Sometimes when people talk about teams with no playoff experience, they use it as a cop-out because they don't have any good reasons as to why that team couldn't really win a championship. If I'm thinking of teams that, off the top of my head, come to mind, the Oklahoma City Thunder from last year's playoff. A lot of people were saying, hey, this team doesn't have any playoff experience, so they probably won't win a championship. Granted, they didn't end up winning a championship, but I think in this case, it's still a little valid, and here's why. When you're going into this WNBA playoffs, you have to think of some of the other teams that are there. So, if you look at some of those teams, you have the New York Liberty, who were just in the WNBA Finals, the Las Vegas Aces, who were just in the WNBA Finals 2 times in a row, the Seattle Storm, who I believe were the Aces' first matchup in the WNBA Finals, granted, not the same roster, but still a team that has been to the finals before. You also have the Connecticut Sun, who have made the NBA Finals in 2021 and lost courtesy to my Chicago Sky. Thank you very much, by the way. And you have the Minnesota Lynx, who I don't think in recent memory have made the WNBA Finals. In fact, they probably haven't made the WNBA Finals since Maya Moore actually suited up and played for this team. But regardless, you get the idea. These teams are not strangers when it comes to the WNBA playoffs. They've been here multiple times. They've been here a lot, and they have veterans on their team. So when you talk about the team like the Indiana Fever, who has such inexperience when it comes to the playoffs, I think that the atmosphere of the playoffs, it might get to them. It might be a factor when it comes to some of these series. And don't get me wrong, I think that this Indiana Fever team is great. I think that they've probably surpassed expectations to what they have been thus far in the season. And going forward in the future, I think that this is a terrifying team that not a lot of people are going to want to face off against in the playoffs. But when it comes to this season right now, I think that a bunch of these other teams with their playoff experience and with their superior coaching experience as well are going to make it difficult for the Indiana Fever to, go and reach the WNBA Finals. Am I saying that they can't? No, I'm not saying that they can't. But I think it is highly unlikely for this team to go as far as the WNBA Finals. In terms of some of the good things that this Indiana Fever team is doing, they've hit their stride. They look phenomenal. They look like a completely different team from when they started the season. They look competitive. They look to be one of the best teams in basketball, at least record-wise in the past 10 games. I think they went on a 7-game win streak coming out of the post-Olympic break, and they have sputtered a little bit, but hey, losses happen. I think this team is very dangerous, and I don't think that they should be slept on. The backcourt duo of Caitlin Clark and Kelsey Mitchell have been money, absolute money. I think in their last game, I think they put up 60 points combined. So, yeah, definitely not a team that you should sleep on. Definitely not a team that I think anyone should take lightly. But I'm still putting them in that pretender category based off of the lack of playoff experience, as well as the playoff experience of all of the other teams that have made the playoffs thus far. Next up, we have another team that I think is pretty easily defined into one of these two categories. It's the New York Liberty. The New York Liberty are coming off of a finals berth last year, and they want revenge. They are still seeking that first WNBA title in franchise history, and they look to mean business. They've been the best team in basketball for this entire regular season. They've maintained their dominance. I think they're still the overall 1 seed, and it doesn't look like they're slowing down anytime soon. Obviously, they're being led by the three-headed monster, which is Breanna Stewart, Sabrina Ionescu, and Jonquel Jones. By the way, 2 out of the 3 of them are former league MVPs, just to show you how insane this trio is. I think that overall, just the experience on this team is going to bode them well when it comes to the playoffs. It's not entirely positive when it comes to the New York Liberty. I think that one of the probably the biggest issue is some of the efficiency woes that their stars have had over the course of the season. And when I say their stars, I'm mainly talking about Breanna and Sabrina, because Jonquel, she's been like hyper efficient this entire season. I think last time I looked, she was shooting over 40% from 3 and like 53% from the field in general. So she's been great. But the other 2, they have had their share of just not great shooting nights when it comes to the course of over the season. However, I don't think that's too much cause for concern, because this team is very deep. You got players like Betnijah Laney Hamilton. You got Courtney Vandersloot, who's still kicking and doing her thing. You got the rookie Phoebish. I forget her first name, but her last name is Phoebish. She's pretty good as well. So you have players on this team that can fill their roles and give buckets as needed. I think that the New York Liberty are the best team in basketball, and I think for sure they are contenders when it comes to the WNBA playoffs. Moving on to another contender, we have the Minnesota Lynx. The Minnesota Lynx, similar story to the New York Liberty. They've maintained their dominance over the course of the season. Obviously, they're being led by Napheesa Collier, but one of the bigger stories with this Minnesota Lynx team is the free agent acquisition that they have in Courtney Williams. Courtney Williams has been stellar for this team. She's been stellar. She's a bucket. She plays good defense. This entire team plays good defense. I think this is one of the better defensive teams, probably like top 5-4 defense in the league. And when you're talking about a league with only 12 teams, top 4 is the upper echelon, I would consider. So I think that this team is pretty good defensively. And when you talk about offensively, they got probably the deepest team in the league. When you combine their offense with a defense that at times matches just how good they are offensively, it's hard to see this team as anything but a contender. And you look at this Minnesota Lynx team, I think that they should be considered one of the favorites to actually win the WNBA Finals. Moving on to the Las Vegas Aces. Another difficult team to actually designate. I'm not going to put them in the contender tier. I'm actually going to say that they are pretenders. Now, I do understand that they have the best player in the world in A'ja Wilson on their team. I understand that she's the MVP of the league this year. It should be unanimous. I don't think anyone else has even come close. I think there was like a 2, 3, maybe 4 game stretch where people were saying, hey, Napheesa Collier should maybe be MVP of the league. Yeah, no. That being said, this Las Vegas Aces roster has not looked up to snuff at certain points during the season. You talk about Chelsea Gray coming back from injury. She started off slow, and she's picked it up. She's ramped it up, but I don't know if she's still 100%. Obviously, only time will tell, and when it gets to the playoffs, you know, the injury excuses won't matter because it's do or die in the playoffs. But it's still something that needs to be said because it is something that could potentially be affecting this team. You also talk about Kelsey Plum. Her efficiency hasn't looked the greatest. Jackie Young, her efficiency over the past like 4, 5, 6 games has looked pretty bad. So when you talk about this team, it's like, all right, A'ja's going to do her thing, but she can't carry this team in the playoffs. And at times, she's carried this team during the regular season. In terms of how I feel that they will fare in the playoffs, every team that makes the playoffs has a puncher's chance of actually winning the finals. That's just common knowledge. But their offensive consistency outside of A'ja Wilson, it leaves me concerned for the well-being of this team and how they'll do in the playoffs. So I designate them as pretenders, which is a crazy thing to say about a team that's looking to win their 3rd straight championship. But hey, basketball is weird sometimes. Moving on to the Connecticut Sun, I think that they are an easy team to designate as contenders. One of the reasons why is they have the best defense in the league. being led by DJ Carrington, who is having a Defensive Player of the Year caliber season. And then they, of course, have players like Bree Jones and Alyssa Thomas, who bring their all when it comes to the defensive side of the ball every single game. Another reason why I really like this team is because they have a very, very balanced offense. When you have Alyssa Thomas, who is the engine of this offense, things run smoothly 99% of the time. It can't be overstated how big the Marina Mabrey acquisition was for this Connecticut Sun team. She didn't play well for us, but she's playing her ass off for them. I think that Marina being in a more simplified role has done wonders for her. Part of that is due to, she doesn't have to do as much on the offensive side of the ball. Look at now on this Connecticut Sun team, they have more players to fill more roles than the Chicago Sky did, and so her role is way simpler. Shoot threes and be good at it. If she doesn't have to, facilitate, she doesn't have to handle the ball as much, she can just shoot threes and be good at it. And that's a plus when you're as good a shooter as Marina Mabrey has been for them. If I did have to say a negative about this team, it's that they do have a super balanced offense, but they don't have necessarily an elite offense. And when you look at some of the teams that are in the playoffs, like the New York Liberty, like the Indiana Fever, they have elite offenses. So going up against one of those teams, yeah, you're going to have to compensate, but that's what their fantastic defense is for. So again, I think that the Connecticut Sun, easy, very, very easy contenders when it comes to the WNBA playoffs. Next up, we have a very, very, very confusing team in the Phoenix Mercury. Now, if you had told me that the Phoenix Mercury would be below 500 to start this season, I'd call you crazy. Shocker, they're below 500, and I can't pinpoint a reason why. You have Diana Taurasi still kicking. She's still doing her thing. I think she's averaging over 16 points per game this season. So she's doing her thing. She's scoring like she usually does. You have Kalia Copper, who's one of the few 20-point per game scorers this season. You have the return of Brittany Griner, who's fantastic. She's shooting like 50% from three this season. Granted, on like 1 or 2 threes per game, but still, she's doing her thing. So when you talk about this Phoenix Mercury team, it's very weird to me that they're below 500. They're still a playoff team because of how the playoffs work, but they're below 500. They lose way more games than they should. Some of these games that they lose, they should be winning, and they just, truthfully, I can't pinpoint the reason why. This team is not very consistent. They have one of the better defenses, but offensively, it doesn't click. And sometimes it's just you have the pieces to build something great, but they don't fit together. And I don't think that this team fits together very well. Looking at the standings, they don't fit together at all, if you ask me. But when it comes to this Phoenix Mercury team, I don't have very much to say about them because they're just not contenders. They're not contenders at all. They're not contenders at all. And then finally, the last team that we're going to talk about in this video is the Seattle Storm. I like the Seattle Storm. I like them a lot. They were my early pick to win the championship, early on in the season, because I really liked the signing of Skylar Diggins-Smith, and just overall, I thought that this roster top to bottom was very complete. It still is complete. And now they have the new addition of Gabby Williams, who's been fantastic for this team so far. I had them as contenders. I don't have them as contenders anymore. And the main reason why is because I don't like their offensive consistency. When they're firing on all cylinders and when things look good, they can probably rival some of the top offenses in the league. But they're not very consistent offensively. One of the reasons why being Jewel Lloyd. Now, Jewel Lloyd's a fantastic player, but over the course of her career, she's always been volume shooting over efficiency. And while that served her well in the past, it isn't really serving her well this season. Last time that I checked, she was shooting below 40% from the field and below 30% from three. No matter how much you're scoring, you can't really justify shooting that poorly. And it's not being made up for by her teammates. Skylar Diggins-Smith is a great player. She's not scoring 20-plus points per game to compensate for Jewel Lloyd's, inefficiency. Nneka Ogwumike, great player. She's also not scoring 20-plus points per game to compensate from that efficiency. So I don't like their offensive game. And when it comes to the teams in this playoffs, you got some dynamite teams on offense. Imagine this Seattle Storm team going up against the Indiana Fever and them trying to go shot for shot with them. It's not happening. It's just not happening. It's not all negative with the Seattle Storm, though. I do like this team's defense, and I also like the addition of Gabby Williams, rejoining the team. I think that she's been great in her role, and she's going to continue to be great for the Seattle Storm team. It's just, when I consider all things about the Seattle team, they don't stick out to me in any meaningful way. I wouldn't be shocked if the Seattle Storm team could take a playoff series, because I think that they are talented enough, and I think that they do have a good enough team to win at least one of these playoff series. But in terms of them making a deep playoff push, I think that it's not very likely. I know I said that the Seattle Storm would be the final team that I'd be talking about, but technically I've only talked about 7 teams so far, and the 8th team, we don't know who's going to make the playoffs yet. There's still a 3-way tie for that 8th seed being held by the Chicago Sky, the Washington Mystics, and the Atlanta Dream. I don't know which team is going to, make the playoffs out of those 3, but regardless of who does, none of those teams are contenders, and I don't think I have to say any reasons why they're not contenders at this point. Well, that's it for this video. I hope you guys enjoyed. Reminder that the WNBA playoffs start on September 22nd, so make sure you tune in to some playoff games and watch some good basketball, because there is going to be good basketball on display. I'm going to go ahead and get out of here. Y'all enjoy yourselves. Peace.